Yo, Foxy, it's your birthday. Not for real, just for play. This is Cree Summer, and Moana Nui will be right back.
Hello.
Hola.
How are you?
I'm here.
Okay. Greetings, everyone who may be watching this show, whether you're doing it live or in a rerun. My name is Joy Stevens, and
I'm James.
and this is James, and we are here to talk history with you because this is another episode of Moana Nui Presents THIStory, the stories that often do not make it into your classrooms, your movies, et cetera, et cetera. And tonight we're talking about Australia, and I'll tell you why. One, because I had a guest plan and she canceled on me, so it is what it is. She goes to me, I don't know where she is. Anyway, two, I had a chance to go to Australia. I want to say around 2012, 2013, somewhere in there.
Okay,
so it's been a minute. I was working for a company and I was doing training for them, and they wanted to train their workforce, the sales force in Australia, in Sydney. So they're like, Joy, go to Sydney. Say less. I will go. And I remember being there, and I remember feeling very much like, wow, this is definitely a European colony, as I walked around seeing not near, right? And then once we were done with work for like that day, we were like, I don't know, I think we had an extra day that we could stay over and then leave the following day. We spent a day, like we went to the Sydney Zoo. We went walking around the area. We went to the Opera House, et cetera, et cetera. And out there in the area where the zoo was, it was like a pier or something. We were close to the water. And there's a guy playing, syncopated drums on an old bucket with a little cup out there for money. I was like, this looks straight up like New Orleans, right? New Orleans, New York, Paris, people doing the same thing under the Eiffel Tower in Paris when I went there too, hustling for money. Except this dude was brown. And he had curly hair, like springy, spiral curly hair. And he was funny, and he was singing and laughing and making people, singing and talking and making people laugh. And when I came up, he was like, wow, your hair looks like mine. You look like me. And I was like, yeah, you look like me. And we were super excited to see each other. And, I had to drop him $5 whole in there because we looked alike. But like, even for him, he was like, wow, somebody else. And I was like, wow, somebody else. Hello, Black diasporic person. But he was Aboriginal too. And I'm not even sure if that is the correct name anymore. I feel like somebody corrected me about that, but I don't remember what it is. So I apologize for saying Aboriginal if it is no longer the correct term, but I'm live on TV and I don't necessarily have a chance to go look that up. So James, if you would be so kind while I'm talking over here, just look up, is Aboriginal still the preferred term for the people who are native to the Australia continent, island? But anyway, so he was there, I was there. We'd be like, like the Spider-Man, you, hey, me, $5. And I remember seeing a few more. Like once you saw one, you saw a few more. Like they were like, oh, waving and everything. But they were all out there hustling. And none of them were in the spaces, the corporate spaces. Because mind you, everybody that I was training lived in Australia. These are all Sydney-based corporate people, salespeople, etc. To a person, they were all white. Different backgrounds, some European white, some Australian white, but white, right? Not nary melanin in the room.
Of course.
Not even Asian, if I'm remembering correctly.
Oh wow.
In Australia, where there's a big Asian population. So to go outside and see this other Black dude, I was like, hey. And then to see him doing something so reminiscent of what I saw growing up, people hustling. All he needed was a pair of like Coke bottle tops on the bottom of his shoes and start tap dancing. I'd be like, this is straight up French Quarter, right? Like I said, when I saw the same thing in Paris, saw the same thing in New York, same thing in downtown Austin one time. So, entertaining and hustling for money is universal.
Okay.
But what I started paying attention to is the plight of. Did you find anything on that term?
I did.
What'd you find?
So, according to the internets, yes, the term Aborigine is generally considered outdated for many and offensive, particularly in Australia. First Nations or First Peoples are accepted terminology that is deemed respectful in the diversity of people.
Thank you for looking it up for me. So had a chance to meet. So if I rewind it all the way back, had a chance to meet a First Nations person, a First People, when I was there, and he looked a lot like me. And so as I started digging into for this show, what is the history of the First People in Australia? Because I remember he looked like me. And as I started reading through everything, all I'm seeing, like if I pull up like the wiki page and something else, something DNA, Southeast Asia, Denisovans versus Neanderthals, Siberia, a lot of Asian influence, which not knocking it because it's there, but they talk about the out of Africa migration. There is literally one sentence that says it's commonly accepted that the diversification of modern humans followed the out of Africa migration around 60 to 50,000 years ago, somewhere in there. There is, however, evidence that for the First People in Australia may carry ancestry from an earlier human diaspora around 75,000 years ago. And this earlier group is still about 2% of the DNA of the people that are alive today in Australia. And so the First People or the First Nations in Australia have a continuous culture that is roughly 65,000 years old. And the reason that's important is, yes, there are other cultures that came and went. There's things in the continent of Africa that are much older. Matter of fact, these people came from somewhere. And so the evidence of human occupation is older, but the continuous culture, uninterrupted, still practicing 65,000-year-old customs, et cetera, is in Australia, which I think is really cool because so often people get conquered and get erased. We saw it happen. Saw it happen in Hawaii. Saw it happen with the First Nations people in the United States. In Canada as well, nice as they are, side-eyeing you about them schools, Canada, you know what I mean. The Spanish invasion of all of South America and Latin America and Mexico, et cetera. So things get burned down, people get erased, their culture erased, their language erased, their religion erased or demonized, and then used as an excuse to erase them. And yet the First Nation people in Australia endure. Some of it is through isolation. Also, you know what? Shout out to the continent island of Australia, because there are animals and monsters there that you don't see anywhere else. There's a lot of animals that are indigenous to that island or continent, whatever you want to call it. I'm gonna call it the island because it's easier to say. They're indigenous to Australia that you don't see anywhere else. Kangaroo is just the tip of the iceberg. They got spiders the size of coffee tables down there. And I'm not here. I would never live in Australia because I'm not built for that. I am built for, palmetto bugs and geckos at best. Maybe a snake every now and then, but just a spider looking me in the eye, bruh. No.
As the social media memes say, the wildlife in Australia has been bred to kill you.
Yes. I feel like if the world ever, if the human population ever diminishes, like the last thing you want to do is drop nuclear material near Australia, because that's where Mothra is going to come from. That's where Godzilla is going to come from, because they're already halfway there, right? We don't need them problems.
Kangaroos already 10 feet tall.
Kangaroos are 10 feet tall. They got you thinking about Kanga and Roo from Winnie the Pooh, and they're about the same size as Pooh Bear. That also lets you know that Winnie the Pooh has to be about 8 feet tall, right? But we don't even know what's going on with Christopher Robin at this point. The math ain't math in there, but they got them cute and sweet, and we all know about Kanga and Roo and her little Joey in the pouch and blah blah blah. Now, bro, have you seen how swole these kangaroos? They be out here just punch people in the face. I'm not built for that. I am a squishy human. I don't think I could survive the wilderness of Australia. And yet, 65,000 years and going strong. They have weathered the storms, weathered the weather itself, and a whole continent of weird monsters trying to kill you. And they just be out there in the bush, just chilling. And what I also find interesting is, again, everything that I went through, because I didn't do my homework till today, but everything that I went through was talking about the Asian influence in their DNA. But then when you pull up pictures of dancers, like some native dancers from like 1981 and an artist and somebody playing didgeridoo, pull up those pictures I sent you.
All right. Get those up real quick.
We're just going to pop them one after the other. What do you see here?
These people are melanated.
Highly melanated. They dogging both of us, right? And the hair is interesting because the hair is curly. And a lot of people think that everybody on the continent, with dozens of countries, is all 4C hair. That ain't true. It's a whole lot of people with wavy hair, spiral hair, and hair like this. In addition to some of the accoutrement that they're wearing is reminiscent, again, of things that you might see in some as ancient practices in some of the villages in Africa as well. And again, I know Africa's a continent, don't come for me. What's the next picture?
Next one is.
Yeah. Dude is just making a pattern. Matter of fact, I feel like that's the pattern on his shirt. He might be making cloth, but
yes.
The hair is maybe straight and wiry, but the skin, it don't get no more melanated than this, right?
Nah.
And there is, it's not a may, there is a Eurasian DNA in all of them, but melanated or not, if you ascribe to the idea that everybody came up out of Africa at some point, and then you think about how isolated, once the water rose, how isolated Australia is, then they as black as they started.
Pretty much.
What was the next picture?
And this is the last one.
Yes. And I think this is the oldest one. And I promise you, the dude in the middle looks like my sister's boyfriend, Emmett. Now, I don't like Emmett. That's a whole different story. But if you look at these three, you got three very distinctly different people here. None of them look the same. And I know some folks will be like, oh, we all look alike, etc. But I'm looking at the bone structure. I'm looking at the noses. I'm looking at the hair, even the shape of the jaw and everything. These three don't look like they're related at all, right? And they may not have been. They may have been in the same village. But yeah, and then the one on the far right got, he got that El DeBarge hair going on. The one in the middle kind of looks like, yeah, he looks like this dude I know from Texas. Who identifies as just black, African American. And so melanin wins again. And I think it is wonderful that there has been a 65,000-year-old collection of cultures, because it's not a monolith.
Right.
There are, I can't even name or count how many different customs, tribes, regions, etc., small villages, whatnot, spread out throughout the continent of Africa and New Zealand, throughout everywhere, and they all hold to their particular beliefs, And so, while I'm running my mouth, what is your take on all of this, James? What as I'm sharing this, what does it make you think of?
Oh gosh, that Europeans are just a plague upon the earth. Period. That's the first thing I think of, because you have these people who are pretty much like the Native Americans, living off the land, living in symbiosis with nature, right? And people who basically had nothing else better to do because they were bored. Let's go out there and F some stuff up. For the sake of, it's our God-given right. And to the point, I remember one, I don't know if it was like 20, 30 years ago, but I know somewhere in like the mid late 90s, it was mentioned that the first peoples of Australia were almost extinct because their numbers were so low. Over basically centuries of colonization from Europeans, because I think the one thing I do remember from history class about Australia was that it was a penal colony.
And the way that they teach history in the United States is that it was just empty grass, right?
Right, like there was no one there. They just they shipped them there, kicked them off the boat, and sailed away, and just left them there to fend for themselves. And it was like basically telling me they just dropped them on a quote deserted island. There was really no people out there. As big of a landmass that is, and if you've ever seen a map of the world, which one is probably wrong in and of itself, depending on when you went to high school, 80s,
right? Looking at you, Mercator. Yeah.
So you see how they have, the world, and then they have a little spot for Hawaii, and then another section carved out for Australia, because those are the two biggest land masses out there in the Pacific. And like a landmass that big, aside from say Antarctica, which we know why no people live there, has had no one living on it, especially when you can see, when you're going through your Earth history, if you will, what Pangea looked like before the breakaway. And you telling me no one was on this landmass millions of years ago?
Thing is, like, I remember doing a project on Pangea when I was in elementary school. My dad helped me build a Lazy Susan that had like 4 levels on it. And it started with, the single landmass, potentially the first break, which suspected would have been the Atlantic Ocean breaking off like Africa and South America and North America from being one piece. And then the slow pull of, the Australia breaking away from the Asian continent, the pull of the Middle East being pulled away from Africa again, the pull of like Iceland and Greenland, everything up there going that way, like all these little things as they kind of float away from each other, coming a little bit later. And then I even had one that said what things could look like in the future, like if there's a massive fault line that shakes up things, if we have some differences in water levels, what could happen? You end up losing Florida, and
nature will find a way. Nature will find a way.
Nature will find a way to balance things out, but there's another culture I was looking up while you were talking that I wanted to talk about, and that is the Sentinel Islands, or the North Sentinel Islands. Sentinelese is another. It's the isolated islands in the Indian Ocean, the Bay of Bengal, actually, in the Indian Ocean.
Okay.
It's kind of northwest of Australia and New Zealand and everything. So it qualifies as being Asian. However, they look black to me. It's a whole lot of black people out there. And they are so isolated from, if you heard the story a while ago about this guy who was like a missionary, and he was going to row out there and go to that island and talk to them, and they shot him with an arrow. Yeah, because they have not developed any of the immunities that we have had to develop, because we keep dealing with Europeans that don't wash their legs, right? So, all of the proliferation of smallpox and COVID and everything. I mean, honestly, for them, like,
yes, Sam.
What?
He's an insert Jeff Goldblum's meme.
Right. Exactly. That threw me off for a second, but yeah.
Sorry.
The
islands.
Think about how they have been isolated. That's another example of unconquered.
Right.
Now, granted, it could be one of those, like, what was in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, where somebody steps over there and then give them a virus and wipe them all out. But that's why people to protect them, and that's why people keep saying, you know what I meant. And that's why people keep saying, don't bother them, leave them alone, because me having like allergies could mess them up for life. And respect that. You ain't got to go over there. Everybody told that boy, don't go over there. Don't go over there. Come back. Don't go. We said don't. Well, shot in the air.
What was the oh gosh, it was a isolated tribe that had been like limited contact with the outside world for like thousands of years, and word got out about them, whatever, and some documentary crew wanted to go down and film their life, how they lived or whatnot with the land and whatnot, and the local town folk around, on the edge of the forest or wherever area that they lived at were like, yeah, don't go in there because they don't like people outside the tribe. Like,
right. Don't go
in there. Leave them alone. They will kill you. And of course, because most of this crew was melanin deficient, was like, oh, no, I'll be perfectly okay. We'll speak to them. We'll, get there. Okay, we won't interfere. And I think they killed 2 people on site.
Yeah.
Of this documentary crew. Which caused the rest of them to turn tail and run because why not?
And then they want to call folks savages, but they're not savages. They are protecting themselves. It's self-defense.
Right.
And you were warned, don't come in here.
Because like you are coming in from a place, like you said, your allergies or whatever.
Even the bacteria on your skin could be fatal.
This is what people don't understand about science on a very base level because they think it's boring, whatever. Like on a very base level, this is what you learn in grade school. We all have germs.
Right.
To some extent. When you meet someone new and you interact with them over a period of time, your body chemistry has to adjust to being around them because it goes from them being a foreign object in your personal space to being someone that your body has adapted to being around. So when people talk about, well, it wasn't that bad when the Europeans went out and exploring. No, aside from the fact that they had zero personal hygiene on top of whatever it is they carried, you're going to the Americas for the first time. You're basically introducing them to the whole scale of pathogens and bacteria, whatnot, that they're not accustomed to dealing with because it didn't exist over there.
Because it didn't exist. It's the same thing that took out so many First Nations in the United States. Smallpox and some blankets.
Exactly. So the same thing happens with Australia. Yeah, okay. You're not going to convince me that the European nations that use Australia as a penal colony didn't know people were there. Of course they did. They, again, was one of those omissions from the history books.
Because they had to know where they were going. They didn't just sail until they hit land. They knew where they were headed.
Right. So you drop off prisoners who, okay, let's see, these people have been, this happens, somewhere around 1500s is pretty much when this starts, that they're shipping them over there. So you're talking about the 1500s, shortly after the great exploration phase or whatever, leading into the 1600s, and prisoners, literally. So you're talking about on top of poor hygiene, prisoners who have virtually no hygiene because no access. They literally, back in those days, literally threw you in a cell, locked the door, and threw away the key. Like if there was a term limit on your sentence, sure, if you survived. But so you got poor hygiene, whatever you caught in jail, whatever you catch on sea, because
not to mention just violence.
Yeah. So, and then whatever limited medical care you got. So say a fight broke out on the ship. Everybody got gangrene now.
Right. Scurvy,
all of that.
All of that. It's similar to the story we told last time about Captain Cook coming down and throwing a dead body in the watering hole and poisoning everybody. Yeah. Just pestilent.
Pretty much.
You know, I looked up that story while I was while you were talking, and that is it was North Sentinel Islands where you had the young missionary that made the mistake of I typed in isolated culture kills a missionary, and I got what I was looking for. His name was John Allen Chow, and may he rest in peace. I don't wish ill on anyone, but he was warned.
Yes, he was.
multiple times. Don't go over there. And they shot him in the arrow in the chest.
Poison arrow too.
Well, I mean, you gotta, because you gotta make sure it works, because they might keep coming. So if the arrow don't get them, the poison in their blood system will. But he seemed like a really good kid, just misguided. But they did not press charges. Nobody could press charges against the tribe because you were warned. You told you what was going to happen, and this is what happened. Consequences of your actions, right? So that's that. But another thing I wanted to talk about is you were getting into it around the hygiene and the disease blankets and everything else, is that there is observable evidence that every single spectrum melanated from Japan and China and Asia and Korea and the Philippines, all of that, into Australia, into the continent of Africa, into the nations in the United States and what is now Mexico and South America, all melanated people. I'll even throw in Turkey and Greece and some of the lower level of Europe. Melanated people had a relationship with the land that they lived on. And so, like we were talking about, these folks was sitting here fighting 6-foot spiders, but they learned to live in symbiosis with the land. And it was always right. Nobody gonna drop off a warrant, right? I will yell it to you from the water. Hey, you in trouble. Come to court, or don't, what are you gonna do? Ban me to the island? I'm here. That's where I want to be. But this concept of belonging to the land instead of owning the land, and finding a way to be in harmony with it. I loved the idea of like drums and how drums figure into so much early civilization. And one of the stories I heard from like Native American sources that the drum is the heartbeat of the land.
Yes.
And you see that throughout a lot of different cultures. And you see that in some of the first people's cultures in Australia as well. And this resistance to living in harmony that seems to come with colonization. All of a sudden, trails aren't good enough. You got to pave everything over. Exploit the resources in an area for novelty, because nobody needs an ivory necklace. You know what I'm saying? You didn't really even need oil, like talking about, but exploiting all the resources, eating up the land and the people, trying to own something. And so you can be exclusionary and keep everybody else out, and then proclaiming yourself the best of the best when you can't even stay out in the sun, right? You might have a decent immune system because you brought all these diseases with you that you apparently are immune to. But just this idea of being at one, being at peace with the land, and then to see in modern times so many people who I would say did not grow up being at peace with the land, trying to find that peace through capitalism, right. Monetizing things like hot yoga. I'm gonna just leave that there. Discovering acai berries, right? Discovering tea. Come on, son. Right. And y'all ain't even do it right. That was one of the best things that Shonda Rhimes did in Bridgerton, where it was season 2. And the Sharma sisters were the main, and they talked about how the British didn't even know how to really drink tea because they were just making a mockery of it all. And she set it up and did the whole thing. And I was like, yo, I'm gonna try that at home. And I did, and it was glorious. It was glorious. I was like, oh yeah, we've been drinking tea wrong the whole time because
you have been. You basically saw it. That looks cool, but I'm gonna do it this way.
Like, and I'm gonna do it in a less vibrant way as well. Yeah. All these people that got murdered over a spice trade, and y'all still out here just using salt and mustard.
No paprika.
No paprika. God forbid you have a chili in there, right?
Sorry, I keep thinking of the Bailey fiasco of early 2000s, which every time we talk about spices, that's the first thing that pops up.
For those that don't remember, this woman who, we just gonna say she was,
It wasn't just her, it was a lot of them, but yeah.
So I remember seeing a picture of this woman, and she had gotten the little styrofoam plate that you get from like a Jamaican restaurant or a Caribbean restaurant, and it had rice and peas and jerk chicken and some cabbage, standard plate. But the rice and peas had a leaf in it. It's that black pepper. It's spicy. Why is it spicy? But, her rice and peas had a leaf in it, and she took a picture of it and put it on the internet and said, "Don't come here. They throw anything in their food." And this was like it had been sitting outside and blah, blah, blah. It's got a leaf in it. And the thousands of comments rose to her like, say you don't know how to season without saying you don't know how to season. Do you not know did you not smell the bay? You didn't know what a bay leaf was? That's a bay leaf. And some people are like, girl, that food's gonna be real good. You need to eat it all because that bay leaf means they know what they're doing, right?
Yep.
I cook with bay leaves all the time, and they don't break down because they're an aromatic. So you put them in the stew, usually something like savory or liquid base. You put it in the stew. I put them in my gumbo. I put them in my rice and peas, in my red beans and rice. I put them in a lot of places. Chicken soup. I made some chicken and dumplings the other day. Remember I told you with the infused butter? It was fire. Y'all, I made some chicken and dumplings, and I used infused butter to sweat out the onions and peppers. And then I forgot that I did that. And the dosage was different because instead of having a pan of brownies, I had 4 serving cups of chicken and dumplings. And every time I eat it, I got to go to bed.
You didn't have any tonight, did you?
No, I did not have it tonight.
Okay, good.
No. We had regular food today. But yeah, this idea of being at one with the land, of respecting nature, respecting the things that your creator has given you. Every early civilization has some form of a creation story, a flood story as well, which makes you really wonder about, like, I remember watching National Geographic one time, and they were talking about, or Nat Geo, they were talking about the likelihood or possibility of Moses parting the Red Sea and where it's located and where it could have been. And if it was like it was, because remember all of the plagues that he talked about before he took everybody up out of Egypt, all those plagues in that order mimic a volcano erupting. The seas turning to blood, the locusts, the dead fish in the sea, and blah, blah, blah. Even carbon monoxide that is lower, is denser than air. And so the way I understood it, I'm way off of Australia at the moment, but the way I understood it, all of the firstborn sons of the city were being raised together, and so they slept together, kind of like boot camp training type of thing.
Yes.
Call it like all boys elementary.
Yeah, it was basically a community.
And they all slept together in this community hall, which was low to the ground, which could potentially be how they all died, right? Because they asphyxiated. And it would have looked like magic to people that don't know about carbon monoxide poisoning, right? And going to the Red Sea and getting there and being able to part it, tsunamis pull water like that.
Right.
And then it goes rushing back in, not too much longer after that, right? So it's possible. It is scientifically possible that you had a tsunami pull that water away and push it back, because that is also an echo from a volcano, right? And so, God was up there like, it's a volcano schedule in like 6 weeks. All right, so in 6 weeks, go and tell them this. All right, bet. Don't worry about the water. I got you. And tsunami, go. Run. Don't be in here 10 minutes.
Oh, God.
You got 10 minutes to get through this sea, bro.
Keep the hyper religious away from this show.
Oh, yeah. I'm not the one to listen to. Unless you really are a believer, because if you really are a Christian, then what I'm saying won't bother you.
Right.
But if you are just a fanatic of organized religion, then everything I'm saying that calls into question the dogma you believe, it could mess with your mind. But so let's talk about that. Aboriginal, First Nations culture, religion, practices, again, going back to the land is sacred.
Yes.
You know, if you think about respecting something that God gave you the land, right? And you belong to the land. So there's not like they were not moving around because they couldn't or because they owned it, but this is where we need to be because we got to take care of this land and these animals and, early, what's the word, agricultural practices so we can eat and everything. So we're going to be right here by this river or whatever. And there's 10-foot spiders in the woods. And so we're not going for the 10-foot spiders. We're going to be out here on the edges. Right. And then you see the same thing across, Nigeria and Ghana and South Africa and I don't want to bring up names, but the Middle East and even into like Istanbul and southern, like even sometime in Spain because of the Moorish influence of Spain. So this idea that, you don't have to conquer things, you can just live with them.
Right.
It's different, and also waste. You had colonizing Europeans that would come into different areas with their, tailored clothes and their hard bottom shoes and whatever, and see people in sandals, or flip-flops, if you will, and very colorful cloth. Color is another thing that you see everywhere except Europe. I'm just saying.
Oh gosh.
The
In more
idea
ways
of
than one.
say what?
In more ways than one. But
In more ways than one. I read an article that talked about some of the early kings of industry, if you will, and how we can't go back and interview them because they're all dead, but there's speculation that a lot of them were high functioning autistic, so they could be laser focused, so they could dream big, so they could do the impossible. Some of them were geniuses or that type of thing, but also like structure, like order, like the idea that you eat 3 meals a day comes from business, not from any other reason. Like if you worked a farm, you would maybe eat before you actually would get up and go do stuff before the sun got too high in the sky, then come in and eat breakfast around 10 o'clock.
Right.
And you might get supper or dinner, whatever you want to call it, around like
sunset, whenever that was.
Sundown, right. Because you're eating before the sun goes down, because otherwise you got to do all that by candlelight. So yeah, you lived on a sun up, sundown calendar. But this breakfast at 8 a.m., lunch at noon, dinner at 6 is something that set a schedule for factory workers.
Yeah.
So you can get the most out of them, because technically they're only getting one break to eat the entire day. But the idea that the structure, the lack of enjoyment in color and patterns and texture and vibrancy and et cetera, and the way it tended to be beaten out of people, it's a very colonizing thing to do. And that brings me back around to the oldest civilizations in Australia having survived all of that.
Yes.
Because sometimes they're even today, they are fighting for equality, fighting to maintain the land that they have been tied to for 65,000 years, right? But no, somebody, the last name, Jorgensen or whatever, and I just threw that out. Don't know if that's right or not, but somebody with a different last name comes and says, I own all this now. Get off my land so that I could, dig for diamonds or oil or what have you. Nobody on that side of things is thinking about the history and the culture that they are just destroying for temporary monetary gain, right? You do all of this, kick all these people out, tear up everything that they have just so you can, I don't know, build a house,
right?
That you don't even live in all year round. How about that? So,
and going through all that, how do I say this? That you mentioned, foreigners coming in, building houses, basically developing the land, if you will, for impractical use.
Right. Building houses that don't suit the climate, and then trying to hire people to come in and fan them, keep them cool. Building roads for wagons to transport goods that they don't need, because I forgot my thought from earlier about not wasting anything. A lot of early civilizations use every bit of the tree or the animal, the hide, the bones, et cetera, and you have Europeans come in and they see that and they consider it uncivilized because it's not in that rigid structure, right? You're not wearing pants, bro. It's 120 degrees out here.
Right.
Why would I wear a 3-piece suit? You out your mind. You over there sweating. I'm feeling good. I experienced that firsthand when I went to Ghana earlier this year because we got off the boat. No, we got off the plane. That was a Freudian slip. We got off the plane and stepped into soup. It was so hot and humid. And I had on my summer jeans, lightweight jeans. I had on a t-shirt similar to this, and immediately started to dehydrate because I just started sweating through my clothes. And by the second or third day, I'm like, I ain't wearing nothing but dresses from now on. I was so glad that I had brought some like little sundresses and house dresses with me. And then, you try to keep your body cool in every way that you can. Most women know this, right? If you wear socks to bed, you're going to be hot. So you wear socks to bed usually in the winter, so you don't have to keep your heat up so high. And if you get too hot, you take one sock off and you put your foot outside the covers. You know that, right? Put your foot outside the covers, cool your whole body off.
I take your word for it.
I'm serious. Women know this. You put your foot outside the covers, cool your whole body off. Then when you get cold, you put your foot back, pull your foot back in. If you're really cold or it's winter, you wear socks to bed. You can have nothing else on. You got socks on. It's gonna keep your body warm. I don't know why. I don't write the rules, right? It's just how it works. But being in Ghana and being so hot, I found myself. I had one pair of flip-flops. I wore them flip-flops 3 days in a row because they were comfortable, but also it kept my feet cool. I had on a sundress, and then I'm watching the people that live there, right? Not the folks that work there, the people that live there, and they have on colorful print dresses. And I bought a couple because, I buy stuff while I'm here. And they were so cool because they were 100% cotton, right? They weren't poly stretch blend that doesn't breathe. It wasn't like the wicking material, blah, blah, blah. All the stuff that we brought with us, because even like one of the guys that was with us had his what do you call them? Soccer shirt, his football soccer shirts and stuff
Jersey,
on. Jerseys, and he still was hot. And then he found himself, he ended up wearing one of the shirts that he had made, because we had clothes made while we were in Ghana, right? But I bought a couple of house dresses off the street, and being able to wrap up my hair, which is basically just a pineapple, just like this, with a little colorful cloth, and then the dress matches the cloth, and I ain't got nothing on under there but a sports bra and some underwear, right? And flip-flops. I was so cool. And then if I did sweat, you couldn't see it because the pattern hid everything. And this is why people that live in Ghana don't look hot, sweaty mess like Black Americans coming over there, because we look like we didn't know what we was doing, right? But it also speaks to being more in touch with natural things. Black Americans have very much adopted colonizer ways. And I'm not even talking about, colorism and self-hate and everything. I'm talking about living the life of an American citizen.
Yeah.
Where's my air conditioning? What do you mean you don't have ice? Eating food and wasting it. Like our tour guide talked so dirty about us because I ordered something that was like a whole fish. And I tried to pick all the meat because she'd already talked about me once before about eating chicken wings and leaving meat on the bone. And she sounded like my granddaddy because he used to say the same thing. Like, it's still meat on that bone. You didn't get that marrow out the middle. I was like, bruh, when he would finish chicken bones, they looked like they had been bleached by the sun, right? And so she's looking at me like, I'm trying to get all the meat off the fish because I know she's going to talk dirty about me if I don't. And I didn't eat anything past the neck. That's the head of the fish. Why would I? What? And she's like, the cheeks are really good. I was like, I'm gonna let you have it here. And she's like, You waste so much food. You Americans waste so much food. I was like, what? I thought I was doing good.
Right.
But, it's all a matter of perspective, right?
Because I ain't eating the head of a fish. I'm sorry.
Yeah. But those are American views.
It is.
views of our European overlords, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, throwing away. And then there's no refrigerator in my room, so I'm not taking anything to go. And so she's like, well, the style of dinner that they have, you tend to see this again more in a lot of melanated cultures, is it's not about go to a restaurant and eat your food real quick and you got 90 minutes and get up and run the way they do here in Atlanta, get off the table because we got to turn this table to make some more money. They'll sit you down. They might come back in 15 minutes and take your order. You'll get the food when it's ready. And then, all right, stay here until you're done eating. And so the idea that you're full now, but wait an hour and see if you want to eat the rest of this. Don't waste this food, because they're not trying to turn that table. They're trying to let you come here and be like family and eat. Right. And I will say this, just to go back to Australia, this is what happens when your plan falls through and you plan to have a guest to talk about stuff with, and then that guest doesn't show up. So you scramble for, what am I doing? And so forgive me for being all over the place, but I hope that you enjoyed the journey anyway.
We are adapting on the fly.
Say what?
We're adapting on the fly. It happens.
We are adapting on the fly. We are being flexible.
Go on.
But I will say, I had kangaroo steak while I was in Australia. And the mistake I made.
Hold up. The same 10-foot kangaroos, but that we talked about earlier, they eat. Okay, continue, please.
So another fun fact, a lot of fur coats that are faux fur are actually nutria fur. And nutria is the type of rat that they have in New Orleans or Louisiana. They brought those rats in to handle a different problem. I want to say maybe snakes or something like that. It was a swallow the spider to catch the fly type of situation. And now they got these gigantic rats they can't do nothing with. So they pay bounty hunters and killers and whatever to gather and catch all the rats because they proliferate too fast. And so sometimes it could be faux fur or it could be rat. Just find out where that coat come from. You're probably better off just not wearing fur because you don't know where it is coming from. But so kangaroos also propagate, and there's too many of them. And so the ones in the zoos are pretty lazy, but out in the bush, there's none but kangaroos out there fighting each other. And so they do the same thing they do with like deer here in the United States, thin out their numbers, right? And so kangaroo steak is on every menu. Now I made the mistake of listening to the European that was with me who told me the best way to eat it was like rare. I had a couple of rare bites and was like, I'm gonna need you to make this medium at least. And then it was better. And it tastes like gamey steak, like every animal tastes like steak, chicken, or pork, right?
And something that you're not used to eating is very gamey anyway, because it's not something you're used to eating here in America or a European nation where the animal is literally raised to be slaughtered. Right.
They're not raised to be slaughtered. They're just out there living their best life and got caught, So, because like you don't raise deer to be slaughtered, which is why venison tends to be very lean and not have a lot of fat on it. But the cows that we eat, first off, do you know they feed those cows newspaper and syrup? All them cows got diabetes, and they got very good marbled meat because it's just fat all through them. Debbie Downer ain't got nothing on me, bro. I got stories to ruin your life and make you never.
I'm still eat the burger though.
Oh, I'm eating the burger. That's my favorite. One of my favorite videos is the little black girl who was like, "There's a burger. It's a hamburger."
Right, burger.
And
like no,
don't call the cow burger. She's like, I want cheese on mine.
Cheese on mine. And she's right. Burger. Yep. Cheese on mine.
Isn't that like cow crime though, to put their own cheese on their body and eat it?
Huh?
It's the same thing as like if you have a chicken omelet, you got the adult chicken wrapped in chicken fetus. That's chicken on chicken crime. So cheese on a burger is cow crime.
Oh my gosh.
It's generational crime.
Oh, your mind is a devil's playground. As far as the chicken omelet, I will always eat the chicken fajita omelet at IHOP because it's good.
It is good. It is
I don't
good.
care how many different types of chicken it is in there.
It's generational murder.
I'm gonna still eat it. I'm gonna still eat the full-grown chicken wrapped inside the chicken embryo.
Okay, so hard cut back to what we're supposed to be talking about.
Yes.
Which is using everything. So that's another thing. Like a lot of the native animals that are native to Australia, they didn't get domesticated, but again, learn to live in harmony with them. So, all right, which is very similar to so many other cultures that respect the animal, even if the animal is killed for food, respecting their sacrifice. You know, if you think about like the way to make something kosher or halal and everything requires a level of honoring of that animal, right? As opposed to feeding it newspaper and syrup and slaughtering it, you know, making it stay pregnant so that it gives you milk so you can have more cheese on its husband. That's wild. That is wild. What is happening? You know,
but also using the
bone.
pretty sure it's using every part of the animal, because I'm pretty sure in the First Nations people in Australia, and you tend to find out with First Nations of every continent before Europe got there. The animals they killed to eat, they use other parts of it for life necessities, you know, if you will. So the fur or the skin was used for clothing or blankets or whatever have you. The roofs of huts,
right? To make Europeans
weapons.
I say Europeans as a monolith as a whole, and we know it's not all of them because some of them are really very nice, and I have friends. But however, there was an article in some UK paper that talked about the revolutionary building materials, and they're starting to discover that clay is such a useful building material because it keeps cool air in, it keeps hot air out, similar to like a clay oven. Like, yeah, we've been through this, and that, you know, building things low to the ground helps it resist weather patterns. Oh, are you trying to colonize and gentrify clay huts, bruh? That's what we're doing now? You trying to act like 65,000 years? Is the fruit, is the question, is the fruit better in Ghana or Australia or the USA? Ooh, good question. I am going to say, since I have been all three places, it depends on the fruit, but my experience in Ghana was that the fruit was on a whole nother level. You know how in the United States, and it's breeds, I understand there are different breeds, but for example, pineapple. In the United States, we get the pineapples from the Dole pineapple plant out of Hawaii, or you might get pineapples out of northern Mexico, a few other places, but they're yellow flesh, and the core is that solid fibrous thing. You got to cut the core out. Like, you know, most places you go, they'll shave off the edges and cut the core out for you. The pineapples that I had in Ghana had white flesh, or you know, cream colored flesh, and you can eat that thing all the way down to the middle. There was nothing, and they were sweeter, you know. And so I don't know if it's different soil, but I think it might be a different breed of pineapple, but they look the same. You know, if you put them side by side, they look the same. It's just that this core was soft and edible, and you didn't have to cut it out because it was like heavy in fibers. It could be a soil thing, but I think it's probably a breed thing. All the watermelon has seeds. There were no seedless GMO watermelons over there. And I bit into a strawberry, and it tastes like candy. It was so good and juicy and bright red and big. Like it was the size of like a small plum, because they let stuff finish growing because they're not worried too much about filling up all the aisles at Walmart, you know. And half the food that we have in grocery stores ends up getting wasted, especially produce ends up getting wasted too. Because if it's out there for a day or two, it's gone because it has to stay fresh looking to us. Meanwhile, they over there cutting mangoes off the tree in the back. You know, you say, can I get if you order the fruit tray for breakfast, it's going to be a minute because they're going to go cut that fruit. Yeah.
Literally have to pick all of it and chop presentation of all of it right then and there. Made to order, if you will. So.
Made to order. And I would still say Australia was better than the USA. USA is coming in dead last for fruit. And it's not, I mean, it was funny because most of it isn't grown in the United States anyway. It's grown in other places. Yep, Africa does have better fruit. It's grown in other places and imported, but that process requires the farmer on the other end to cut it early. so that it hypothetically ripens in the heat of the truck.
In transit,
and then you get something that's kind of halfway done when you get it to your, Walmart superstores or whatever. That's why fruit that says organic or that is farm to table is so much more expensive, because the process is different, but it does taste better. Whole Foods fruit is good.
yes,
And the farmer's market fruit is good, but you don't get that in your average Kroger or Publix or, Wawa, what have you, And so, yes. So even that has been colonized, because once you start trying to make money off of it, you start to exploit any weakness in the system and cut corners.
Because profits.
Yeah, it's just like sawdust in the gas tank, or sawdust in the engine to try to quiet it down. It's the same thing. Paying for plastic. Most Americans have plastic in their bodies at this point, just because of all the plastic around us. Yep.
No, let's just say all of us.
All of us. Yeah.
All of us.
But thank you for asking the question. I would say, Africa has much better food. The bananas. Oh, how did I forget? Yo. First of all, the bananas are bigger, freakishly long. Because what I saw more often than not was that when they would serve bananas, they wouldn't peel it. They would just cut it right in half, and you would pick up a half, and half a banana was still like, 4 or 5 inches. I was like, these bananas are packing. It's amazing. And they looked exactly the same, but they tasted so different. They tasted like banana pudding, almost like it was sweet.
Okay.
It was sweeter. Like, you can get bananas from the store and they're not ripe, and they just kind of taste like nothing, even a little bitter. Every banana I had was delicious. Everything was delicious. And the chicken is different. So they don't use a lot of hormones. The chicken just grows how it grows. Right. If you've ever been to Church's Chicken here in the United States, you know that is unnatural.
Yeah.
The way it be looking. It's like, is this a small turkey? What am I eating? Right. But the chicken there, all the food, I never had a bad meal while I was in Ghana or Togo or Benin, because I traveled through all 3 countries. Never had a bad meal. Never had a bad drink. Never had a bad experience. It was great. I highly suggest everybody go. And I will say the food I had in Australia was good, but it was American. I want to say Americanized, but I would say more like colonized, because it was just Australian food, but it just tasted like American food, except for that steak, that kangaroo steak. But that is one of the ways that people get conquered. Like when I'm hopping back and forth. When we talk about First Nations people, whether it's Australia or what is now known as the United States, or even what is now known as Mexico and South America, living off the land also makes you vulnerable to people destroying that land. Yeah. And like one of the ways that, at least here in the United States, one of the ways that they really decimated First Nations throughout the Midwest and West and South as well, was to kill off all the buffalo, because the buffalo was integral to their economy, if you will. And they used every bit of it. They would eat the meat, then they would use the bones, and they would use the skins, and then they would use the bladders for carrying, like water skins, like storage and all that kind of stuff. And I remember seeing a picture during the westward expansion, manifest destiny of it all, of dead buffalo stacked like a mile long and like 10 feet high. Do you understand how many buffalo they had to kill to get that picture? And then took a picture of it. That's weird. But it removed their food source for the most part.
Yeah. And
then made them dependent on aid, right? And so that's another thing I think about when I think about the continent of Africa. People are like, oh, they don't have any good drinking water, and they're so malnourished. Except they was fine till you got there,
right? And
you started fracking, and you destroyed their water, their local watering aquifers or water tables, and now they got to build a well. And you're like, oh, we built 6 wells. That's great. You destroyed their entire ecosystem.
Right?
And you want credit for fixing something, for putting a Band-Aid on something that you broke. I'm just saying. Not
Cliff-
maybe not the
Cliff
person that's
coffee
listening
mug.
to this, but somebody did it, and you know what I'm talking about. Mhm. Just
Brooks
just
coffee
wrong.
mug. You try to super glue it and stick it way in the back.
Exactly. And hope nobody notices what you did.
Right.
Mhm. Mhm. What other questions do y'all have? Anybody? Yes, I should have done that well done kangaroo steak, because that rare and raw is the same word as far as I'm concerned. I did not. I took a bite because I do like to be open-minded and try
Try
things.
it first before, yeah.
Bite, because it was like really just seared around the edges, and it was very ropey meat. Like it didn't look like it kind of looked like corned beef. You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
Like the stringy of the meat.
Stringiness, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Except it was just raw. No, go burn. You know what? I could have been that chick from Saturday Night Live with the steak that was like rocking the table,
Shaking the whole damn table. Yes.
Yes. That's what I'm gonna do next time. Like I need this done. I need this well done.
Brick, basically. You want it burnt all the way through.
Want to burn all the way through. I don't eat my beef like that though. If I'm eating, first of all, I don't like steak in the first place. If I do eat beef, it's gonna be filet mignon and it's gonna be medium well. And that's expensive. So if I'm gonna do that, I might as well get some salmon or some seafood.
True.
Sorry. And that again, I am way off topic, way off. We're just flexing with it, but we're at the hour mark, and so I do want to start to wrap this up and just say, if you have some, like, say, little known history fact or a culture you want us to examine, again, we were trying to figure this out a couple hours ago. So if you have a culture you want to examine, hit us up. You can leave it in the comments, whether you're watching it live or later, and say, hey, do a segment on XYZ. You know, we want to talk, maybe we'll talk about the Moors in Northern Africa going into Spain. Maybe we talk about the history behind Queen Charlotte. That might be a show because I love Queen Charlotte. Maybe we talk about, since I am deep into like Korean K-dramas and K-pop, etc. Maybe we do something on like the history of Korea. That might be the next thing I do. Unless I can get another guest in here that don't ghost me, the next thing we do might be like the Joseon dynasty and like a little Korean history. And I got a couple people I can tap to help me with that. So unless y'all say something different, that's what's happening next time. But
audience participation.
Yes, we need audience participation. Because this is still a relatively new show. So we're trying to get the format down and get it right. Today has been fun because it's kind of been, this is what happens when you have ADHD and menopause hit lack of preparedness. You get this. It was still fun. It was kind of crazy. I admit that. James, thank you for being here and being crazy with me. Or watching me be crazy, rather.
Robin to your Batman.
Yes. And on that note, we will bat scram on up out of here. Thank everybody for being here tonight. Catch us again in a month. And again, unless I hear different from our audience, it's going to be Korean history next time. All right. There's a lot of parallels between Korea and we're gonna dig into a little bit of like the parallels between Korean culture and Black American culture. We'll be back with that next time. All right.
All right.
Thank you, everybody. God bless and good night.
Good night.